Hi,
Ariel. My guest
nice to see you.
is Ariel Lanyi, who has recently recorded a concert for us at the Stapleford Granary in Cambridge, right, Ariel?
Right.
Have you ever been there before?
I have been there once before to record, to stream another concert for a venue in Colombia.
I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that they're allowing YCAT and people to use this venue for recording. I think it's quite wonderful. So let's start at the beginning with you. I see you started playing the piano when you were 5.
A little bit before 5, yes.
And is there anybody else in your family who plays an instrument?
No, there isn't. Both my parents are music lovers and quite knowledgeable about music, but they are editors and translators, and hence I'm the only musician.
Fascinating. And you did play the violin?
Yes, I studied the violin for almost as long as I studied the piano, along with composition. I'm a terrible violinist. I can I can assure you of that. But it did help me enormously as a musician in general and as a pianist specifically.
Which did you start first?
Well, I I never uh, really officially started piano. So I had a piano in the house where I was born, and I used to play on it quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then at some point I started having lessons.
Yeah.
And around the same time I started having violin lessons. But I would say that I was definitely more involved with the piano from
Yes.
a very young age than with the violin.
So I know you have a scholarship to the Royal Academy. So, but it must have been more than the scholarship that led you, say, to London rather than to America.
I came to London specifically because of Hamish Mill. Hamish I met in Cortina d'Ampezzo, which is a wonderful resort in the Dolomites.
Yeah.
Some of the most stunning scenery on the planet. And I actually went to Hamish. I actually went to the masterclass because I was playing at that time Mettner's Sonata Ballade, and Hamish Mill recorded almost all of Mettner's piano sonatas, and I knew his recording, and I wanted to play that for him. But after having spent an hour on Mettner, everything else I was playing sounded a lot better, and I just somehow knew that this is the person I need to study with. So that's what brought me to London.
That's wonderful. Gosh, that's exciting.
He sadly passed away a year ago.
Oh my!
And I studied with him for just under 2 years, but those 2 years were absolutely transformative, really. And now I'm very lucky to study with Ian Fountain, who is also a phenomenal musician and somebody who's helped my playing tremendously.
And what about composition? Are you still studying composition?
No, I don't study composition anymore. I did until I moved to London, and once in a while I compose for my own desk strictly.
Yes.
Bartok said that he composed for his own desk, which of course was not true, because he didn't, and thank goodness he didn't. I could probably say this. I could say the same thing, but it would actually be true.
So yesterday afternoon, I sat down with my husband and we watched your performance for us, and it was amazing. I mean, here we are sitting. We were sitting at I have a laptop computer, and that's about as good as it gets in this household. I'm not a techno wizard and I don't hook things up to whatever. And I still like to think that I can get through to what a performer is saying if they have something to say, even though it's a screen and the sound isn't perfect. But both my husband, in the first movement, of the Haydn sonata that you were playing. Well, I mean, at one point, we both went, oh, exactly in harmony. And it's such a fabulous performance that you did. And I think you really are an incredible musician. And I'm so happy that you've done this for us. The other thing was the the Lutoslavsky that you played.
No, Szymanowski.
It was Szymanowski, the variations. I've
Yeah.
never heard them before. It's a terrific piece.
It is, yes. It's a delightful piece. It is not so often played. It's very much unlike the Szymanowski that is more widely known, which is quite post-tonal or verging on the post-tonal, with what I think is a very impressionistic character. Unlike the composers we think of as impressionists, Debussy and Ravel, who in my opinion are absolutely not impressionists.
You'll have to elaborate.
Okay, I can do that, but
yeah, let's finish this first.
Yeah, but I think that Szymanowski, in his later works, for example, the masks for piano or the myths for violin and piano, he paints this very murky character at times, and his tonal language, in a way, it distorts the image of what's going on. But the Opus 3 variations, being an early work, it is really quintessential late Romanticism, and
Yes.
and their things are crystal clear. And for some reason, probably because we have so much, other late Romantic repertoire, and because the Szymanowski we hear in the concert hall is something completely different, then this piece somehow fell between the cracks. But I think it's absolutely a worthy and an exciting piece of music.
So, what goes through your mind when you put together a program? But we'll go back to Ravel and Debussy. How do you put programs together?
I cannot say that I have a formula for doing it. I look for some sort of balance in character and in epoch too. So unless I'm specifically asked to do it, I usually don't play only romantic programs or only classical programs. I like having a mix of a couple of things. And one thing that I try to pay attention to, it's not always possible, and it doesn't always give you the best programs, is that I don't want every piece to end loudly. That sometimes doesn't work, and sometimes I do end every piece loudly, but I think it's nice to have. I think it's nice to have a couple of soft endings where the music just dissipates into silence rather than, breaking into silence from a loud moment.
Yeah.
So that's something that in the past I used to abide to quite dogmatically. Nowadays I was very tempted to play a couple of programs where every piece ends loudly, and I think they still worked. They still worked well, but I just try to balance it in one way or another.
I do love those moments when things end very quietly, and if the performer has been really captivating, the audience just sits there in that silence and that quiet, which is kind of palpable. And those to me are the high moments of concerts for me.
Yes, this is actually one of my absolute favorite things about live performances, is the absolutely surreal sense that you have, 500 or 2,000 people sitting in silence and they're all thinking about the same thing,
Yes.
or they're all, even if they're not thinking about the same thing, somehow their attention is turned to that one moment. It's really an intoxicating feeling.
The very first time I heard Murray Pariah was, oh my goodness, maybe in the mid 70s. I'd never heard him. And I was in London and I went with a friend to the festival hall. We played a recital. And we were so blown away that we left the festival hall and we walked all the way across the bridge to the tube station in complete silence. We couldn't talk to one another.
That's something I did many times, actually, walk across that bridge in silence.
Good, we have something in common.
Yes, I remember. I even remember the first time I did it.
Yes.
It was it was a night I will never forget. It was Halloween 2015, so I just moved to London, and the late Stanislav Skrovachevsky
Yes, conducting.
was conducting the LPO in Bruckner's Fifth Symphony in what must have been maybe the, one of the, what will have been, I think, maybe one of the 10 ultimate Bruckner performances of the 21st century. And the last entrance of the chorale theme, I was sitting, I think, in the fifth row, and I was in tears because I knew it was about to end, and I just wanted it to go on forever. And that feeling, it just stayed with me ever since. And I was stupefied when I was walking across the bridge.
Let's go back to Debussy and Ravel.
Mm-hmm.
You said they're not impressionists?
I don't think they are. I mean, our general notion of impressionist, when you think of Debussy and Ravel as impressionist music, what goes on in our minds is we equate them with the impressionist painters, Monet,
Yes.
Cézanne,
Yes.
Manet, etc.,
Right.
Renoir. But I think if you dissect their music, especially Debussy, Ravel, okay, Ravel less so, but especially Debussy, if you dissect his music and you see what it's made out of, um, really every, you know, if we could imagine the gestures of his music being akin to brush strokes, then every single brushstroke would be of paramount importance. There is no filling in Debussy's music. Debussy himself, I think, described himself as a chemist in a laboratory, experimenting with different tubes.
Interesting.
That's how he described himself. And if you really need to make a comparison with the world of painting, I would suggest thinking rather of 18th century painters. You could think of Ingres, especially on the other side of the Atlantic, when you can go to the Frick collection and see one of my absolute favorite paintings, which is this portrait of. It's a portrait of a lady. I forgot exactly the name, but it's by Ingres. It's easily checkable online. And if you look at that painting, every angle is so clearly defined, and her gaze is so pinpointed. You could even compare it to English painters of the same time, like Gainsborough and Reynolds.
Yes. Yes.
Everything is so crafted to the very last detail, uh, that there are no, the brush strokes don't merge into each other in the same way that they do in Monet and Cézanne. Now making making a comparison of value between the two. I equally love them both. I equally love them both. But I think that if you really need to make such a comparison to Debussy, in my opinion, the classicists are a lot more indicative of the character and of the inner workings of Debussy's music. That's the way I see it.
That's fascinating. Do you play much chamber music?
Yes, quite a lot. I was very blessed to have fantastic chamber music partners from whom I learned an incredible deal. And I'm very much looking forward this summer to go to the Marlborough Festival.
Oh, that's so interesting you say that because there's another young pianist who I encountered. I
Mhm.
use that word in capital letters, bold, underlined. He came here 2 years ago. He is, I think, one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met in my life. His name is Filippo Gorini. He was supposed to have gone to Marlborough last year, and it didn't happen. And I would kill to be a fly on the wall with the two of you at Marlborough together. I just think because, oh my God, I'd love to hear conversations between the two of you. And I think that I just
That's
can see some kind of thought processes in your head and in Filippo's head where I would be fascinated to hear you talking. Is there any repertoire that you feel more happy with, or is there any repertoire that you don't feel happy, comfortable with yet playing?
There are certain composers whom I I don't play or I don't often play simply because I feel that at this moment I'd I'd much prefer to listen to them, and I wouldn't be entirely sure of what would be my, if you will, my truest interpretation of certain works by these composers. So for example, I love Chopin. I can't get enough of him as a listener, but I just don't think that I am such a great Chopin interpreter, and it's for me. I think it's a lot better to not perform him for now. I do learn some pieces of his for myself, and that's a greatly enriching experience. But you
Mhm.
know, when you go in front of an audience, there's obviously a certain responsibility that comes with performing, and I just think that there are composers whom I would play a lot better than Chopin, and there are people who play Chopin so well that that yeah, I choose not to play him for the moment being. I mean,
Yeah,
of course that of course this might change, but
yeah.
for now there's so many composers whom I'm so excited to perform, and there's so many pieces by these composers by Beethoven, by Schumann, Schubert, Haydn, etc., etc., which I haven't yet learned, and which I would want to learn in the next couple of years. That's what I focus on now. I enjoy listening to certain other composers like Rachmaninoff or Prokofiev if they're played well, but again, I just don't think that it's really my domain as a performer.
Schumann happens to be my favorite composer for the piano. Do you play much Schumann?
Yes, Schumann is one of the composers I enjoy playing the most. I feel that I have, yeah, I feel that I really, well, again, I don't want this to sound, yeah, I don't want this to sound arrogant in any way, because I'm not saying that not saying that I don't have anything left to learn about him, because I've got so much that I don't know about him. But I think that he's one of the composers I've gotten to know the best, in the last couple of years, and I've played quite a lot of his works, and they speak to me in a way that is utterly unique. His sense for his sense for drama,
Yes, yes.
the bravery he has in almost admitting to shyness is uh, is something that I find particularly fascinating, and it is something that I enjoy, enjoy bringing into a performance.
very early on in my presenting career, I was lucky enough to get Annie Fisher to Vancouver. And it's her performance of the Schumann Fantasy, which I have, of course, in those days, it was a tape. And I always used to say, that's the music I want to be buried with one day, because that Schumann Fantasy, it just has every possible emotion known to the human being in that music. I find by the end of it, I'm completely wiped and I have a hard time coming back together again.
I must listen to that performance.
Oh, it's quite extraordinary. It was such a, she was supposed to start her program with Mozart, and she was playing Schubert, and in the second half, she played the Waldstein. And just before the concert, she said to me, "Do you mind if I don't start with Mozart?" And I said, "Madam Fisher, whatever you want to do is fine with me." So she said, "I'll start with the Schubert." And I said, "Well, will you announce the change or do you want?" "Oh, no, you have to go out and say the change." And as I was about to step out onto the stage, she pulled my arm and she said, "Now, don't say anything about Mozart and don't say change." And my one foot was already out of on the stage. And I kind of pulled myself together and I said, "Tonight, Annie Fisher will start her program with Schubert." And I said nothing about Mozart. And it was very extraordinary. And then at the end of that concert, it's one of the stories which I'll have to go in my book one day. My daughter, who's now the general manager of the VRS and deals with everything that I can't deal with, which is most things, she was about 5. And she was at the concert with us, and we were sitting in the 4th row. And I had a bouquet of flowers to give to Annie Fisher after the performance. And the idea was Sarah, my daughter, was going to go up and give her the flowers. So at the end of the concert, and she played one encore, I gave Sarah the flowers and I said, "Go." And Sarah went up on stage, and Annie Fisher walked out, and Sarah gave her the flowers. And then Annie Fisher bowed and started to walk off the stage. And Sarah turned to me and my husband and shouted, "Hey, Mom, she's much older than she looks in her photograph." And all the people in the first 5 rows who heard that thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard in their life. Fortunately, Annie Fisher didn't hear it. Anyway, my presenting life is full of experiences like that. Where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? Are you going to remain in England? Are you going to go back to Israel? What do you want to do?
Oh wow, that's an unanswerable question. For now, I'm very happy in London.
How long can you go on being a student?
I'm graduating. I'm graduating from the academy this year, but for now, for now, I'm doing well in London because I have I have some contacts here, and I've got some performances which have been postponed and some performances which are being scheduled for the next 1-2 years in London, and it's just such a perfect city for artists and for culture.
So that begs 2 questions then. One is, assuming you came over on a student visa.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you're not a student?
Since I came on a student visa, I acquired Romanian citizenship, and I have just been granted my settled status after having lived here since 2015.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, so you have Romanian heritage.
My father is from Transylvania. Yes.
You've played in the States before, I presume.
Yes, I'm also a U.S. citizen.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
How long has that been?
Since I was born, because both my parents lived in the States, and that makes me a U.S. citizen.
Okay, so what do you describe yourself as? A what pianist?
Oh no, I'm Israeli. I mean, I grew up in Israel and I lived there for all of my childhood.
It's interesting. Israel has grown up a generation of quite remarkable pianists. I mean, there's you, there's Tom Borrow, there's another pianist I've heard who's quite wonderful, and I can't remember now. There's exciting things coming out of there. So, yeah. Well, I certainly hope that Marlborough will happen this summer.
It looks like for now. It looks like it will.
It will. Okay. Well, I have a wonderful time there. I look forward to sharing your performance with our subscribers and patrons and our family, actually, we call them, and to presenting you like real live when we can touch you and we can go out for dinner afterwards and have some fun together.
I cannot wait to do that.
Great. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. And
thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much. It was my.
Take care.